Ards Peninsula, a narrow spit of land, almost an island. Its western shore lies on Strangford Lough. On the horizon, the Irish Sea. The gardens at Mountstewart benefit from the warming effects from the Gulf Stream. Only 15 miles southeast of Belfast, there flourishes here an almost unbelievable range of plants in a lovely and occasionally eccentric setting. There's a wildness, but a formal side too in the gardens. This impressive Italian garden is one of the first parts of the garden to have been laid out after the First World War. 20 ex-servicemen were employed to help clear this site. It's a formal design, but within these parterres, the planting is anything but formal. It's unusual, but a surprisingly effective mixture of herbaceous perennials, and shrubs, and roses. The roses are modern hybrids, but in this narrow raised bed, we have a rose of a very different kind, Rosa mutabilis. And some people know this one as Rosa chinensis mutabilis, but modern opinion suggests that it's a form of the hybrid Rosa odorata. And to be sure, the flowers have a scent, a very nice fragrance. The name mutabilis also refers to the flowers. It means changeable. And the flowers change in colour from flame in bud. Then as they open, they're a sort of basically yellow, clouded pink. After pollination, they change to a sort of coppery pink. And then finally, a darker shade. Now, no one's really sure just how or when this rose first originated, but there's no doubt about its ornamental merit. Because apart from the flowers, the young shoots are a lovely plum purple. The young growths too, the same colour. And the whole plant has a dark suffusion. It's intriguing and dusky. It's normally 3 to 4 feet high in an open situation like this. But against the warm wall, it can get 3 to 4 times that height. And it's against the sunny south-facing wall of the house that 2 other special roses find a congenial home. In 1807, the Kew plant collector William Kerr introduced from China this strong-growing, cascading rose. It was named Rosa Banksy in honour of the wife of an early director of Kew, Sir Joseph Banks. It's a sweetly scented rose, but it's a little tender, so it's only suitable for mild areas. A rose with similar requirements, and also from China, is Rosa levigata. It became naturalized in the southern USA and did so well, spreading so widely, that it was given an American name, the Cherokee rose. The large flowers are very fragrant too. When it comes to the wild shrub roses, the numbers are legion. But I count this one as one of my special favourites. As you can see, it's not suitable for the small garden. It's the burr rose, or chestnut rose, Rosa roxburghii, and it was named after William Roxburgh, one-time superintendent of the Calcutta Botanic Garden, from whose garden this rose in a double form was first described. Its qualities read like a catalogue. Its bark is thin and papery and flakes, and especially attractive in the winter when the leaves are shed. The leaves themselves, pale green, fern-like, ideal backing for the flowers. The flowers in bud are covered in prickles, and so are the fruits, hence the name burr rose or chestnut rose. And when those fruits later in the season fall to the ground and lie in a great green pool, they smell of apples ripening in a loft. But it is the flowers, these big, bold, single, rose pink flowers which capture the attention at this time of the year. There are plants at Mountstewart from all the temperate regions of the world. And here's an evergreen shrub, a native of Tasmania, Olearia erubescens. And it's one of the daisy bushes which are so common in that part of the world. Tiny daisy-like flowers in great crowded heads, and they really do attract the bees. From the other side of the Pacific, California, a ceanothus, the blue ceanothus. That's very appropriately named Cascade. And the flowers are very tiny and crowded together in dense heads at the tips of the shoots. Above that, one of my favourite evergreens. That's south into another continent, South America, Chile, the Chilean lantern tree, Cranodendron hookerianum. Distinctive in those pendulous bell-shaped flowers. In mild areas of Ireland, that grows like a weed. And places like Mountstewart, it reaches a prodigious size. But for sheer size and vigour, it can't match these magnificent Tasmanian blue gums. We get oil of eucalyptus from the leaves of this tree. Planted in the late 19th century, they've grown at more than a foot a year. This prickly customer comes originally from Chile. Its outline is unique and unmistakable. The monkey puzzle and most of the other large conifers in the estate date from the 1800s, but the gardens as we see them today were only begun in 1921, when the 7th Marquess of Londonderry, who'd inherited the estate in 1915, came here to live. But the architect and driving force, one might almost say moving spirit, behind the new planting was his wife, Edith, Lady Londonderry. She was who designed all these gardens, giving each its individual character. This particular garden she called Mary Garden. It's named after the youngest daughter of the family. And here's Mary as a young girl depicted in this very charming fountainhead. They even adopted the nursery rhyme, the silver bells and the cockle shells. The planting is also on an interesting design. It's a Tudor rose with flower beds representing the petals. The colour schemes favour blues, whites and silvers or greys. And in designing this, Lady Londonderry was influenced by that great exponent of garden artistry, Gertrude Jekyll. She was the doyenne of Edwardian gardeners. Gertrude Jekyll designs figured prominently around many of Britain's great houses. The sunken garden at the west of Mountstewart owes a lot to her influence. The plantings here show plenty of orange, with the azaleas being particularly startling. Lady Londonderry had her own sense of design and gardening flair that wasn't without a touch of the bizarre. Here she commemorated her friends from the Great War, the Ark Club. On the Dodo Terrace, built in 1925 and sculpted in concrete, the animal nicknames of the members of the Ark Club, Lady Londonderry's club for wounded and convalescing officers. The stone of the terrace provides a fine setting for an impressive group of Rodgersia pinnata, a hardy perennial. Boldly veined, fingered leaves and a froth of flowers. But the real importance of the garden as a collection lies in its ability to support a near subtropical flora that must have been hard for Lady Londonderry to envisage when she first came here. In fact, she first found Mountstewart dark, damp and dismal. There was salt spray to contend with and the inevitable wind. But at least she had the advantage of earlier plantings of sheltering trees, native beech and pines from California. Growing side by side with our own wild yellow iris, a plant of remembrance, the Easter lily. Its other name, lily of the Nile, refers to its African origin. Above the Japanese maple, the brush-like spikes of a rare Chilean evergreen, Weinmannia trichosperma, It doesn't have a common English name, I'm afraid. It's a slender tree. This specimen is about 35 feet tall, only about a third of the height it reaches in the Andes. It's tender, and it only thrives in the mildest, most sheltered parts of the British Isles. The same could be said of this lavender-flowered daisy bush from the peat bogs of the Chatham Islands near New Zealand. It's Olearia semidentata, and very different from the Olearia we saw earlier. And this, would you believe, is a Buddleia colvillei from the Sikkim Himalaya. Joseph Hooker, who first discovered it, thought it the most handsome of all Himalayan shrubs. How's this for a giant? It's Echium pinniana from the Canary Islands. And it's related to our wild viper's bugloss, and it has the same stiff, bristly hairs on the stems. This is a monocarpic plant. That means when it reaches flowering size, it then dies and the seed is scattered all around. But it takes usually about 3 years to reach that size. First year, a small green seedling. The second year, it produces a stout stem, as you see, with these long leaves. By the third year, it's gathered up enough steam to push up this great chimney-like stem tapering to the top, 15 feet at least. Although the woodland supports its share of tender plants, by far the greater variety grow here, to the south of the house. The walls here provide warmth, shelter, and the support necessary for plants like Clianthus, a rare New Zealander. Its striking flowers have given it two common names, the parrot's bill, or in the typical red form, lobster claw. Melianthus from South Africa has a reputation for tenderness, but it can be grown quite successfully in southern parts of Britain. Its chocolate maroon flowers are unusual, but it's the foliage that makes it such a special delight. Not only stone and concrete has been used at Mountstewart to create shapes and formal features, but evergreens too. Here in the Spanish garden, the common old Leyland cypress has been used to create a very fine, dense, green ornamental screen behind this garden house. But an even more interesting feature is this one over here. Living arches, pillars matching those on the house, and Leyland cypress again, only 12 years old from cuttings, trained along metal frames, and these are only clipped once in the year towards the end of June. In fact, these have just been done. I was pleased to see that the old hand shears and old-fashioned hand shears were used to get a nice, clean, neat finish. On the north side of the house, by the balustrade, are some equally manicured specimens. They are bay trees that were packed up and shipped all the way from Belgium in 1923 at a total price of £99. Clipped evergreens aren't to everyone's taste, but they are a real part of our gardening heritage. People who don't like trees looking like mushrooms might find the Irish yew more acceptable. This hasn't been trimmed at all. This is the common yew. Because of its more elegant spreading habit, this is the form that's traditionally always been used for clipping to formal shapes, especially in the art of topiary. And this must be one of the best examples of that art. You see how the wire frame originally was created, along which the branches of the yew have been trained and carefully clipped to form this Irish harp. In the guidebook to the gardens, this is called a taper. Perhaps this is a beer-drinking folk singer. No matter how you look at it, I still think the first one's much more like an anteater. Here in the Shamrock Garden, we have Mountstewart's most famous formal feature. You can see a stone shamrock or trefoil design, and in the centre, the red hand of Ulster. It illustrates an old legend. The story goes that there were two rival Scottish clans who raced from Scotland to Ireland. Whoever the first to reach the land would claim it. And the MacDonald ancestor of the Londonderry family, seeing that he was losing the race, cut off his left hand and threw it onto the shore, thereby claiming the land. It's been planted with a red form of Begonia semperflorens, and these have only just been planted, but in another month's time, they'll be really spectacular. Our common wild foxglove doesn't look at all out of place here, and its tiny European relative is equally at home. It's called the fairy foxglove, Erinus alpinus. Our little herb Robert is the commonest native member of the cranesbill family that offers a whole variety of garden ornamentals. One of the most easily recognised and most striking of all the hardy geraniums is this one, Geranium silostemum. Silostemum with a silent P. I much prefer its older name, Geranium arminum, because that at least tells you where it comes from, Armenia. It's a big, bold foliage plant. It may need some support as it gets bigger. But best of all, these magenta crimson flowers with a dark eye. When I was a boy, we used to call it black-eyed Susie. Perhaps the best of the blue geraniums is this one, Johnson's Blue, a hybrid between our native meadow cranesbill and this one, Geranium himalayense. The cranesbills often have strikingly veined petals. The finely penciled Mrs. Kendall Clark is a low-growing cranesbill, delicate and beautiful. Many of these Himalayan geraniums are useful in our gardens as hardy summer ground cover. Here's an even paler form called Cashmere White. Isn't this lovely? A giant amongst geraniums is Geranium anemonifolium from Madeira and the Azores. As you can imagine, it's a tender plant, only suitable for mild areas such as Mountstewart. Anemonifolium because the leaves are like those of some of the anemones, and the leaf stalks on the lower leaves are especially strengthened and stiff and act like stilts or flying buttresses even, to support these stems, sticky, hairy stems, especially now in flower with all these rose-purple flowers. Another unusual fact about this plant is that it's comparatively short-lived. This is about 5 years from a seedling. When this is flowered, the seed will be scattered and the plant itself will die. The Welsh or Westmoreland poppy grows wild on northern and western hills. Although it's similar in flower form to the cornfield poppies, the papavas, it belongs to a different group, the Mechanopsis, whose members are found mainly in the mountains of Asia. This one's from Nepal and Bhutan. It's a bigger plant than the Welsh poppy. The flowers may be similar in colour, but just look at how delicate they are. Slightly bell-shaped when they first open, and later on they'll open wide. But look at the great bunch of golden stamens in the centre. And the leaves, deeply lobed and scalloped, very attractive now with those raindrops on them. And the leaves, like the stems, are villous, that is, they're covered in long golden hairs, hence the name Mechanopsis villosa. This is a perennial species, but it pays to grow a few plants every other year from seed, or it can be divided in the spring. Perhaps the most spectacular of all are the fabled blue poppies of the Himalaya. Mechanopsis grandis and Mechanopsis betonicifolia have produced several choice hybrids. This one happened by chance. It was grown for years at Mountstewart before it was spotted by a nurseryman who lived at the foot of the mountains of Mourne. After some dispute as to its parentage, it was finally named Slieve Donard, after the highest mountain. It never produces seed and has to be divided regularly to maintain the stock. Different again is Mechanopsis nepalensis, a really spectacular species. Normally this is a blue-flowered species, but this is a form in which the flowers are this beautiful cherry red. If you admire the fragile nature of poppies, you'll certainly take to the abutilons. They flower through June and July, a succession of delicate blooms. They're actually in the mallow family, but they're woody stemmed and in warm sunny situations develop into large shrubs or even into small trees. One of the most exotic trees at Mountstewart is the mountain cabbage tree, Cordyline indivisa, from New Zealand. There it grows on moist mountain slopes in North Island, especially in the area of the volcanic plateau. It's in the same family as the agave plant, the century plant. And the flowers are borne in great heavy bunches from the tips of the stems and hang below the leaves. It's not a hardy tree, but where it's really happy in mild areas as here, it gives a real subtropical effect. There are similar looking plants at Mountstewart that are true palms, and they don't all come from desert islands. This fan palm, Chamaerops, is a European native from the shores of the Mediterranean. The most commonly seen palm in the British Isles is this one, the Chusan palm from China. Trachycarpus fortunei is its Latin name. It's regarded as the hardiest of the palms, but certainly not suitable for cold, exposed inland areas. Very distinctive, as you see in the tree behind me. Big fan-shaped leaves with long finger-like lobes hanging down. And that one has started to flower, hands almost of yellow flowers, great bunches emerging from the top of the stem. But just as distinctive, there's this great thick layer of fibre surrounding the stems of the plant itself. And this is the remains of the old leaf bases. Now in China, they use this in some place to make ropes, weave into ropes or as mats. And I've seen it in Yunnan in the southwest of the country, being used to make very useful, very attractive fibre ponchos, which really keep the rain out. Fibre is another important characteristic of this plant, the New Zealand flax Phormium tenax. These leaves contain one of the world's strongest natural fibres. It's virtually impossible with the bare hands to tear that leaf in half. Another interesting factor, the flowers, and they're borne in stems which rise sometimes as high as the leaves again. They're just in bud here. You can see how the bracts sort of overlap like tiles on a roof. Eventually, when that spike is fully extended, the flowers hang out tubular and they're full of nectar. And in New Zealand, there are various wild birds which visit the flowers when they're open to drink the nectar. And there's a story that in the old days, the Maoris used to lie in wait in the evening or early in the morning for the pigeon, the New Zealand pigeon, which is a big bird, to come and drink at the nectar. And when they're drunk enough, or maybe too much, they would fall to the ground intoxicated. And the Maoris would just come out, pick them up, and put them into the pot. For story and legend, Ireland is hard to beat, and the supernatural powers of animals figure strongly in Celtic myth. The stag has been specially linked with departing souls in the spirit world, and a white one is believed to have some extraordinary powers. On a hill overlooking the lake is one of the garden's most tranquil and lovely areas. This is Tir na Nog, the private burial place of the Londonderry family. The name comes from a Gaelic legend and means land of the ever young. It was to Tir na Nog, but all those who succeeded in mounting the white stag were carried. From this place, there's a tremendous view down to the waters of the lake and a great panorama of greens in multiple shades, purples, all the trees, evergreens and deciduous. Considering its low-lying situation on the peninsula, it seems fitting that Mountstewart, where flourish so many plants on the world's high places, should have visual contact with some of the world's, and certainly Northern Ireland's, most romantic mountains.